Hi class, today we will be discussing the story Two Friends by de Maupassant. Maupassant was a French writer and he wrote during the period when the Franco-Prussian War broke out. Now, many students get confused and think that Prussia has something to do with Russia, but actually Prussia was a German state. Okay, it was a German state, and Maupassant himself enlisted as a volunteer in the war, due to which he was able to witness the war at a very close front. This led him to recognize the brutalities that are associated with war. All right. And following this, whenever he wrote short stories are what he writes mainly. Whenever he wrote short stories, it was these brutalities of war and the futility of war. What does futility mean? It means no one is going to be a winner at the end of the war. That means in every war, it is the innocents who are suffering. It is the innocents who end up losing the most. And also, the soldiers who are fighting in these wars, even though they are instilled with some patriotic ideas, in most cases these wars are fueled by or powered by the desires of a few rich and powerful people, and the innocents are the ones who get caught up in these wars, right? So Maupassant in his stories tried to depict these kind of things. The present story, Two Friends, also is set in the backdrop of the Franco-Prussian War. That means the war between France and Prussia or Germany, right? And with this background, he tells us about the friendship of two friends. All right. This story was originally published in French, and it was called Deux Amis. Okay, Deux Amis is what was the original title. All right, there were many different titles that were given by various authors, but the translation stuck with Two Friends. All right, so though our Maupassant was someone who did not like associating with people much. He liked to be lonely. He has written this very beautiful account of friendship to tell us about the importance of friendship, the feelings of patriotism, and the futility of war. These are the themes that we will be discussing in this particular chapter, right? Basically, throughout the story, we are going to be seeing that there is a dialogue between the two main characters, and through their dialogues, through their feelings and experiences, Maupassant will be telling us about this Franco-Prussian War. Okay, so he begins the story by saying, besieged Paris was in the throes of famine. Okay, besieged means it was seized from all sides. I think those of you who play all these combat games might be knowing what a siege is, right? So Paris was sieged. That means it was surrounded by the enemies on all sides. Okay, and because it was surrounded, all the supplies were cut off, and Paris was in the throes of famine. That means it was suffering from famine. There was not enough food. Even the sparrows on the roofs and the rats in the sewers were growing scarce. Okay, so even sparrows and rats were not there. That means we can assume that maybe people were eating the sparrows or the rats, or maybe because humans don't have enough food, the rats and the sparrows will not have food also, and thus they were all dying. Okay, people were eating anything that they could get. They were eating rats and sparrows too. Now, the two character names that we have to be familiarized with are Monsignor Maupassant and Monsignor Sauvage. Okay, now don't get confused with these words that I'm saying. Please look them up in your text. Okay, Monsignor Maupassant was actually a watchmaker by profession, and he was walking around the boulevard. That means the street at night. Sorry, not night, one boulevard on one bright January morning, and his stomach was empty and he was just strolling about. Suddenly, he came face to face with an acquaintance, someone he knew quite well, and this acquaintance was Monsignor Sauvage, who was a fishing chum. That means, these two were not very good friends in the sense of the term that they meet every day, but they were fishing chums. They used to go fishing together, and that is how they developed their friendship. Before the war broke out, Morissot and Sauvage used to be in this habit that every Sunday morning, as soon as the sun comes out, both of them would set forth and go for fishing. And there was this place called Il Marante, and that is where they used to go and fish. And they used to fish whole day. That means beginning from the morning till nightfall, they used to keep fishing. Okay, and this very spot where they are standing right now, that is where both of them used to meet every Sunday. And this Sauvage was actually a quite stout, jolly little man, and he was a draper. That means he was in the clothes business. Okay, and he was also a very good fisherman, just like Morissot. They spent half the say side by side. Okay, so when they used to go fishing before the war, they would spend almost most of the day together. They would sit side by side fishing. But their French, that is how their friendship developed. And one thing special about their friendship was that they didn't even need to talk. That means while fishing, you need a lot of concentration. You can't make a lot of noise. And here also, these two friends, when they used to go fishing, they won't talk a lot. ഒരുപാട് സംസാരിക്കൊന്നുമില്ല. But even in that silence that was there between them, they could understand each other pretty well without even using words. So that's how good their friendship was. And in the coming few lines, the old routine of these two fishermen is described, of how even when they did talk, they did not talk about anything very great or very personal. They would talk about the weather and about how fish are rare or what, all of those things. And in these few words, they used to appreciate each other a lot, even with these few words. In autumn, in summer or in autumn, whenever, no matter the season, they used to continue this habit. And this continued until Paris was besieged. The war broke out and Paris was besieged. And because this Il Marante was at some distance from where they were staying, they were not allowed to leave from this place. And they could not continue their fishing fishing activity. And hence, after all these days, when they met each other, they were quite sad. And these are sad times, they said to each other. And such weather, this is the finest day of the year. Even the weather has been bad all these days, but look at the weather today. It looks so good. Okay, the sky was cloudless and it was blue. And both of them were very sad. They were walking side by side by the boulevard. They were quite reflective and sad. And they're thinking of the times that they used to go fishing. And soon they enter a small cafe and they had some alcohol together. And obviously when they had alcohol, their spirits were a little bit more revived, and they took the daring decision of going fishing once again. Okay, shall we have another absinthe, they said, and they kept drinking together until they were drunk enough to take the stupid decision of going across from the siege നടത്തി നിൽക്കുന്ന, അതായത് സെക്യൂർഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സോൾജേഴ്സ് പിടിച്ചു വെച്ചിരിക്കുന്ന സ്ഥലത്തിൽ നിന്ന് പുറത്തേക്ക് പോയി ഫിഷിംഗ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഡയറിങ് തീരുമാനമെടുത്തതിന്റെ കാരണം എന്താണ്? ആ ആൽക്കഹോൾ കുടിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് under that effect they decided, they were suddenly brave and they thought, let's go there. And the French outposts are close to the columns. That means the columns, Il Marante, where they used to go and fish. He says that the French outposts are near to that place, and I know the colonel. So I will go and get a passport. So in order to cross this area, that means those outposts where the barricade is kept by the soldiers, in order to cross that area, they need to have a password. And usually this password is only given to the army personnel or other diplomatic people. But here, he says that he knows Sauvage says that he knows the colonel, thus he can easily get the password. So then they decide and go. They become, Morissot becomes very excited. So they decide to go back home, get their fishing gear, and meet here in this place again. Finally, an hour later, they meet again and they begin their journey towards their fishing spot, which is, and while they're going there, they cross many areas. They cross some vineyards which border the Sheen River. It was about 11 o'clock at that time. Then, before, when they cross that area, they see the village of Arguintil, and this village looks lifeless. Now remember, this is outside the outposts, right? So that's why it's all very lifeless, in the sense that all the people who were living there probably had to leave because of this war, and maybe bombs were thrown and there was firing, and we don't know what happened to the people, but many were dead. The rest probably ran away from there. And they say that it almost looked lifeless. That was not how the village used to look before. Now it looks lifeless. Then they saw the mountains, the great plains, and everything looked empty. Okay, that is what war does to a place. Everything looked empty, and it all looked very bare, very bare. And pointing to the mountain in front of them, Soviet says, the Prussians are up yonder. That means the Prussians are on top of that mountain. And the sight of, the deserted area and then the mountain in front, suddenly, they had some misgiving, some feeling of terror. So they started walking quite fast. The Prussians, they had never really seen these Prussians. Okay, they are normal, very, very common citizens. They have nothing in particular, nothing special about them. They are not related to the army or any other people in any manner, and thus they have never even seen these Prussians. They only know through the news and through what they hear from others that the Prussians are attacking and the Prussians are evil and the Prussians are our enemies. But these unseen enemies, as we might say, they've never even seen them. They just know that they are up there on the mountain and we should be afraid of them. Okay, for the past few months, the Russians had been attacking France, pillaging, massacring, starving them. And somehow they felt a hatred against these group of people who they had never even seen. But what is this hate based on? Based on what they have heard from their government, from the others and everything else, right? Suppose we meet any of them, ask Maupassant, what will happen? What if we meet one of them? Let's offer them some fish, Solvich says. As I told you, Solvich is this jolly kind of man, very, very funny type man, okay? So, we'll just give them some fish. So, that Parisian lightheartedness, he belongs to Paris, and Paris people belonging to Paris are said to be quite light-hearted, jolly people, and Solvich has that quality in him. Still, they hesitated to cross that area because until now they were covered by some trees and bushes, but in front of them there was a vast expanse of land, or clearing where marangalum maravonnumillatha or area appo adu cross cheyan avarku oru bhayam undarnu. So let's be careful, but let's start. Soviet said, and they quickly made their way through those vineyards, and they were creeping and bent over. Finally, they reached the river bank. They ran across those clearing landilake കാണുമ്പോൾ അവർ വേഗം ഓടിയാണ് പോകുന്നത്. വെള്ളത്തിന്റെ അറ്റത്തെത്തിയപ്പം കുറച്ച് ഡ്രൈ ആയിട്ട് ഉണങ്ങിയിരിക്കുന്ന കമ്പുകൾ, ഡ്രൈ റീഡ്സിന്റെ പുറകിൽ അവർ ഒളിഞ്ച് അവിടെ ഇരുന്ന് ഫിഷിംഗ് ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങി. Maupassant placed his ear to the ground. That means, he placed his ear to the ground to, yes, to know whether he can hear some footsteps. Okay, but he heard nothing. They seemed to be utterly alone. Their confidence was restored. Arumilla ennoru orappu vannu kaniyappattekkum they were confident once again, and so they began to fish. Okay, before them the deserted Ilmarante hid them from the farther shore. അപ്പോൾ അവരുടെ മുമ്പിൽ എന്താണ് ഇൽമറാന്ത എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ഒരു ചെറിയ ചെറിയ ഹില്ലോക്സ് പോലത്തെ ഒരു പ്ലേസ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അതിൽ നിന്നും അത് അവരെ കവർ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അപ്പുറത്തെ സൈഡിൽ പ്രഷൻസ് ഉണ്ടെന്ന് നമുക്കറിയാലോ. അപ്പം but they are covered from that due to that Ilmarante that is there. There was also a restaurant, okay, that was closed, and it looks very deserted, even though these were places where people used to thrive earlier. War കാരണം ആൾക്കാരെല്ലാം പോയി, and everything looks deserted and dead. Okay, Monsignor-നാണ് ആദ്യത്തെ മീൻ കിട്ടിയത്. Then Maupassant caught, and almost every moment or the other, probably because no one has been fishing for so long, ഒരുപാട് മീൻ അവർക്ക് പെട്ടെന്ന് തന്നെ പിടിക്കാനായിട്ട് സാധിച്ചു. They were very happy, that's why, right? They were filled with joy, not only because they were getting the fish, but because they could finally practice their this passion of fishing. അത് വീണ്ടും ഒന്നുകൂടെ പ്രാക്ടീസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നല്ലോ എന്നുള്ള സന്തോഷത്തിലാണ് അവര് ഇരുന്നത്. That was a pleasure that they had been deprived of for so long, and now they are very happy that they are able to practice this pleasure once more. Okay, then the sun poured its rays from one side, വെളിച്ചമുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, and they know they completely are fishing like മുഴുകി. They don't hear or see or anything. Okay, they are completely unafraid anymore. ഇനിയിപ്പോൾ അവർക്ക് പേടിയൊന്നുമില്ല. അതെല്ലാം ആ ഇൻഹിബിഷൻസ് എല്ലാം മാറി വന്നപ്പോഴാണ് പെട്ടെന്നൊരു ശബ്ദം. There was a rumbling sound. What was that? Which seemed to come from the bowels of the earth. ഭൂമിയുടെ അടിയിൽ നിന്ന് വരുന്ന പോലത്തെ ഒരു ശബ്ദമാണ് കേട്ടത്. Shook the ground beneath them. The cannon were resuming their thunder. Okay, അപ്പൊ അവരുടെ അടിയിലുള്ള ഈ മണ്ണ് ഇളകുന്ന പോലെ തോന്നി. And that is when they realized that the cannons എന്താണ്? Yes, I don't know the Malayalam word for it. Those long things that throw those very heavy ball-like things. I don't know how to explain that better. Okay, അപ്പൊ cannon എന്താണെന്ന് ഒന്ന് ഗൂഗിൾ ചെയ്യുക. I'm sure you must have seen it in some movies. All right, so cannons were resuming their thunder. That means cannons വീണ്ടും blast ചെയ്യാൻ തുടങ്ങി. And that was the sound. ഈ cannons വന്ന് വീഴുന്നതിന്റെ സൗണ്ട് ആണ്. അപ്പൊ even though the active warfare എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മൾ ടിവിയിലൊക്കെ കാണുന്ന പോലെ എല്ലാവരും വാളും കൊണ്ട് ചെന്ന് അങ്ങോട്ടും ഇങ്ങോട്ടും ഇരിക്കുക, അങ്ങനത്തെ അല്ലല്ലോ ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ warfare. That means they're always, നമ്മുടെ ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ LOCs-ലൊക്കെ ആണെങ്കിലും പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് പ്രശ്നങ്ങളൊന്നും ഇല്ലെങ്കിലും they keep firing these shots. ഓക്കെ, അതെന്തിനു വേണ്ടിയാണോ? ഷോർട്സ് ഓഫ് വാർണിംഗ് ആണ്. അതായത് ഞങ്ങൾ ഇവിടെ തന്നെ ഉണ്ട്, നിങ്ങൾ ധൈര്യപ്പെട്ട് ഇങ്ങോട്ട് വരുമൊന്നും വേണ്ട എന്നുള്ള ഒരു പേടിപ്പിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയുള്ള കുറെ വാർണിംഗ് ഷോട്ട്സ് ഇടയ്ക്കിടയ്ക്ക് വീണ്ടും. അപ്പൊ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഇവിടെ വാർ ആക്റ്റീവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു സമയമായതുകൊണ്ട് കാനൻസ് ആണ് ഫയർ ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്, അതാണ് ബ്ലാസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് അതിന്റെ ബ്ലാസ്റ്റ് സൗണ്ട്സ് ആണ് ഈ കേൾക്കുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, okay, Maupassant turned his head and could see toward the left, the bank of the river, the formidable outline of Mount Valérien. Mount Valérien എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ആ ഒരു മലയാണ് കണ്ടത്. അതിന്റെ മുകളിൽ നിന്നാണ് ഈ സ്മോക്ക് വരുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ അവിടെ ഇരുന്നാണ് ഇവർ ഈ ബ്ലാസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് എന്ന് മനസ്സിലായി. The next instant, a second puff followed the first. വീണ്ടും ഒരു ബ്ലാസ്റ്റും കൂടെ ചെയ്തു. And in a few moments, a fresh detonation made the earth trouble. വീണ്ടും ഒരു പുക കണ്ടു കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോഴത്തേക്കും പിന്നെയും വീണ്ടും ഒരു ഭൂമികുലുക്കം പോലെ ഉണ്ടായി. It was the blasting of the cannons. Others followed minute by minute. ഓരോ മിനിറ്റിലും ഓരോന്ന് വെച്ച് ഇങ്ങനെ ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നു. അപ്പൊ ഈ മൗണ്ടനിൽ നിന്ന് വരുന്നതായിട്ടാണ് ഇവർക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത് കാണുമ്പോൾ. ഓക്കെ, ആൻഡ് അതെന്താണ്? ആ മൗണ്ടനിൽ നിന്നുള്ള ഈ വാറിന്റെ സ്മോക്ക് പോയി പീസ്ഫുൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഹെവനിൽ ചേരുന്നതായിട്ടാണ് കാണുന്നത്. Monsignor Savage shrugged his shoulders. They are at it again. വീണ്ടും തുടങ്ങി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. Why? The shrugging of his shoulders എന്താണ് കാണിക്കുന്നത്? It shows how uninterested he is in the war. അപ്പം he is not at all invested in the war, in the sense that ഈ war കൊണ്ട് അയാൾക്ക് ഒരു ഗുണവും ഇല്ല, നഷ്ടവും ഇല്ല. So he doesn't know why it's happening. He only knows that it is depriving him of the things that he loves. അയാൾക്ക് ചെയ്യാൻ ഇഷ്ടമുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങൾ, ജീവിക്കാൻ ഇഷ്ടമുള്ള രീതി, കഴിക്കാനുള്ള ഭക്ഷണം, ഇതെല്ലാം ഈ യുദ്ധം കാരണമാണ് കിട്ടാതെ ആവുന്നതെന്ന് അയാൾക്കറിയാം. So that's why he doesn't understand why these people need to keep blasting these cannons. So that is where we'll stop for today, and we'll take this up next week. What I want you to do for the rest of the hour is read the story to friends. I've already sent you the PDF in your class group. Read till this part, and then we'll continue the rest in the next class. All right. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the session.